Now, our perspective interview this morning is Irris Makler. You may have seen Irris on our screens as France 24's Jerusalem correspondent, but for the last 3 years she's been working on another project, and it's an altogether more comforting one. That's food. Irris has written a cookbook. It is, though, far more than just a collection of recipes. She's interviewed survivors of the Holocaust about the food they grew up with and are now passing on to their children and grandchildren. At its heart, then, this is a book about resilience, survival, and that complex, intangible relationship we all have between food, family and memory. Irris joins me now from Jerusalem. Irris, good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. Your book, then, is called Just Add Love. And before we talk a little bit about it, let's take a listen to a short clip about the woman who inspired this book.
This project with Eva Grinston, a Holocaust survivor and the mother of one of my closest friends. I saw Eva cooking from an old handwritten cookbook. It turned out to be one of the few things she has left from her childhood.
My mother couldn't teach me, but these recipes taught me all, and the strengths of memory.
Irris, we heard there Eva Grinston talking about the power of memory. Tell us then a bit more about her story and why she inspired you to do this project.
I was inspired, I think, because she is an inspiring woman, and I saw her cooking from that book, and I was open to asking her questions about it because I hadn't written down my own grandmother's recipes, and it was a hole in my life, and I kept trying to recreate my grandmother's honey cake. And I saw Eva, who was the mother of one of my best friends, cooking from this book, and one day she sat and told me the story. It's almost all she has left from her family. She was a survivor of the death camp of Auschwitz. She's a woman from Czechoslovakia, from Bratislava in Slovakia. She was 16 at the end of the war. Her mother, her sister and her aunt had been murdered in Auschwitz. She returned to her family home and felt there was nothing there that remained of her. And then she went, there were Russian soldiers billeted inside. They said they'd give her 15 minutes to take what she could find. And down in the cellar, she found a box. In that box were the last pictures her sister had drawn before they were taken to the ghetto by the Nazis. And there was her grandmother's cookbook. And she's been cooking from that book ever since, keeping alive the tastes of that vanished world, making those tastes the favourites of her grandchildren. One of the cakes, her grandmother's favourite cake, is on the table at every birthday for her grandchildren in Australia. And I wanted to tell that story. And then I found more women and I wanted to tell their stories.
I wanted to ask you then about the grandchildren as well, Irris, not just about the grandmothers. We do sometimes talk about, don't we, food like my grandmother used to make it. And there is something about eating food that's been passed on from one generation to the other that feels like it's connecting you to your past, to your roots. Were the grandchildren you spoke to, did they find this important as well as the grandparents?
Yes, they did. And any gifts that the grandmothers bring of either real gifts, you know, here is a cake I've made for you, they all say this is the best taste. And one grandmother actually wrote out some recipes and put them together in a book that she gave as a present at a wedding. And the granddaughter was so touched and honoured. And it's in pride of place in her kitchen. And now that her grandmother has died, it's even more important to her because that's how she recreates the taste of home. That's how she remembers her grandmother. That's how she honours her grandmother. So it's very strong, and the grandchildren love it. They love it because they love the taste. They love it because they love to be able to make it. And then they're back in their past.
Let's talk then about the food itself. Because lots of some men, but most of the women you interviewed were Jews of European heritage. Does that mean lots of the food was quite similar, or were you able to find lots of delicious, diverse recipes to go in the book?
No, delicious and diverse, as are the stories, because I've interviewed women starting from Russia, going all the way across Europe and ending up in North Africa. It's quite interesting. I, of course, know there was a North African theatre during World War II, but I never said to myself, what did that mean for the Jews of Libya, for example? So there's a Libyan grandmother in the book. Her dishes are fantastic. They're Greek food, they're Central Asian dishes. I made a big effort for a range of stories and and a range of food. But I do have to say that I think half the recipes in the book probably are sweet, because grandmothers like to bake with their grandchildren. They believe it holds them there. And in this particular instance, the grandmothers also remember their own childhood, and that's their memory of their grandmothers who died. And so it's a double reason that there's so many sweets, cakes and desserts in this book.
Lots of stories, lots of grandmothers then to celebrate here. But let's talk about the two men that you spoke to, two grandfathers. For them, passing on their food, their oral history, was that different to some of the women they spoke to, or were the ways that they told their stories the same?
It's interesting. I was looking for grandfathers, but here's what I've learnt. Women are the great survivors. I've interviewed more than 20 women and only 2 men, and most of the women that I've interviewed are widows, so that's another loss they had to bear. So when I found, when a woman was not a widow, we took lots of photos of the grandfather, of the living grandfather, to honour him, and I did search for grandfathers, and I did find men who cooked, and it was quite interesting. One of the grandfathers particularly had never told his story publicly before. He's from the same town as Elie Wiesel, the same area, and had quite a similar life experience. And the contrast between that man who wrote books for which he became famous about the Holocaust and the man that I interviewed who had never told his story, that was quite stark for me. And it was very interesting because the women that I interviewed who have told a story before told it, they've thought about it. With him, it was a series of memories. So it was most episodic. It was almost like a modern film, unrelated memories one after another. And he said to me, these memories are so terrible and I don't speak about them. And sometimes I wonder if they ever really happened. And then I went away and I found a lot of corroboration for him, including a very touching account by an American soldier who liberated the camp that he was found in. And he thanked me for that because he said, now I know you've authenticated my memories.
Okay, Irris, thank you very much indeed. Irris Makler there talking to us about her book coming out next year, Just Add Love. And if you would like to pre-order that book or indeed contribute to the crowdfunding of it, you can go to our website, france24.com. We'll put up all the links for you there.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Irris Makler.